In 2009, I was an Indiana State Park Ranger at a historic site, Fort Wayne. I was finishing my evening route and on the way to my last stop, a parking lot that was directly adjacent to the St. Mary's River. I was driving down a dirt road in the middle of a wooded area when I suddenly passed a large figure, crossing the road about 150 yards ahead. It was on two legs, covered in fur. It was bipedal, which immediately ruled out any signs it could have been a bear. Bears are primarily quadrupedal, although they can stand upright for short periods of time. Bears are also common to the area, but I've never seen a bear, not like this and up close. It looked like a massive hulking humanoid wolf, but again, I'd never seen anything quite like it. I suppose the thing is, everything happened so quickly. I only got a momentary glimpse of it. My rational mind tells me that it was a bear, but there was something else going on. Look, I'm no cryptozoologist, but I have heard of dogmen and werewolves on the internet in the past, and even though they seem to be nothing more than a legend or hoax, something about this just doesn't quite sit right. In 2016, I came across several more posts talking about werewolves and dogmen and the possibility of their existence. I would love to hear your opinion. What do you think? Not my story, but my grandfather's, actually. You see, he used to be a ranger back in the 1970s in Yellowstone, located in the Sonoma region, which is right above the park. At the time, it was an extremely remote site. In fact, there were only 4 hunters that would even stay there during the 3-month season. It was during winter. The cabin they stayed at was comprised of large couches, turned into beds and a fireplace and kitchen. Upstairs just had one bed. A hunter would be stationed in each different sector during the night. Despite the extreme cold, the rangers, for whatever reason, were not allowed to light a fire in the fireplace. This is my grandfather's account of what happened. There was one incident that was very strange, which to this day he still dreams about, and he's never been able to talk about it with anybody, not even his own partner. He was on night patrol by himself, on horseback, checking everything was fine for the night. The horse seemed to be extremely calm, so calm that he thought something was wrong. Then, one of the horses spooked really bad and tried to run off. He looked to where the horses were looking, and there was something to his left. It was taller than him, perched on 2 legs and looking right in his eyes. It was very dark in color, almost a shadowy black, and it just walked away into the bushes. He believes it was after his limited water supply, which was brought back in via horse. One night, he woke up and heard strange sounds coming from his water stash. He grabbed his gun and with his light, searching the area in front of his cabin. While he didn't discover any creature, he did discover a large set of bipedal, dog-like footprints and paw marks in the snow, surrounding his water tank. It never happened again, but he's always mentioned it to me when I was a child. He always had a very uneasy feeling about that particular region. So, what do you think? And this is actually a good coworker of mine who's currently in park management. I won't say his name or any other credentials to protect his identity. It's pretty risky information. We'll call him John. John, at this time, drove a county patrol rig and patrolled the forest at night. Not well liked by his counterparts for some reason, he was told about the heavy forested areas that fewer rangers patrolled with lesser frequency. John was told by supervisors during his new training to avoid these areas at night, if possible, especially with winter nights fast approaching. Roads would become very dangerous in cold temperatures, and at the end of each shift, if conditions dictate that a written work order not to be issued in order to complete your shift's tasks, then you receive overtime pay at the completion of your shift. So, the easiest out for park personnel is to never write a work order for the road, claiming no employee is available to work that road. John was put on overtime for several shifts. He explained nothing physical happened, but the area in which he failed to complete his patrols is known as Burke Canyon and Topanga State Park. not far from the rich of Los Angeles urban forest, but deep in a very isolated area, away from the main hiking trails. He was paid overtime for multiple shifts, and forced to write the shortage of patrol log when he returned to the ranger station at the end of his shifts. Thinking it was a ghost story, or wasted money to patrol, he went on his way. No more log shortages. But he did notice that every workday, he fell off one of his normally manned roads when suddenly, by his coworkers, himself included, issued to him where there never was before. He had always taken the long way to his destination, as he was still on patrol. In his mind, because the roads were used much less after heavy rains in the canyons, it used to be common practice to just wait till the road cleared and opened. In this way, he could redrive the already crossed trail and be done with the assignment, saving time, effort, and gas. His daily routine indicates to him that he could resist finishing other assigned roads. But first, he must return to the old, wary, well-worn road that was not open. The one cold, snowy night on this road, he noticed a road sign warning that up ahead it was closed due to weather conditions. He obeyed the law and turned around. Further up the road, his radio began to fail, his internal computer losing radio signal, meaning it would lock his entire computer system up. So, he removed it, tried reattaching it. When this was done, John claimed that he felt like he was no longer alone. He heard at a distance what he described as a very low engine-like rumble of a truck without a muffler, with external speakers as its only source of sound. The sound seemed to parlay toward him as if to say, "Look my way." It almost commanded attention. The sound pattern was meant to imprint itself in his mind. And that's when he saw it. 2 foot-tall, frog-faced creatures in what appeared to be pale suits, with almost boxes on the back of their heads on tall, stick-like man frames. This was no alien abduction. When I asked what he said, he'll never forget it in his life. John remembers that these creatures spoke to him telepathically, that these beings told him, "Do not be afraid, we will not hurt you. We have been looking for you, and looking for your life." Apparently, these were extraterrestrial beings, and were interested in giving him valuable advice, apparently. He could feel this angelic light coming inside of his body, soul, mind, and spirit. They knew all about him, but told him to understand and truly remember that he needed to speak, was to be told to retangle his own mind, release the energy, and unkick his own spirit, lifting his soul for balance and becoming a channel. He was to trust himself, to justify this inner peace. Look, this story is crazy, but you can believe it if you want. I believe it, because when he tells me, he is so sincere and genuine in his face and expression. While it sounds pretty crazy, he's not the first one to have crazy paranormal encounters like this, or a face-to-face encounter with an alien. This actually took place in 1998, when working near the Great Basin National Park. I'm a ranger, so it's not like I'm unaware of all the legends and stories of the forest, specifically native folklore. Anyway, I was driving my car home when I decided to take a rarely traveled route. It leads through a bunch of very desolate, isolated landscape. I did not see any real native animal tracks in the snow here. This was odd since usually do, and the area is filled with the occasional coyote or fox. I kept looking behind me and around me. I just had this feeling, this sense of dread that should not be there, and I could not shake it. And I could have sworn that I saw a dark, lanky shape running along the ridges of the hill nearby. It could have just been my overactive imagination, but I generally don't have these kinds of feelings or visions, especially in the winter. Animal activity is much lower. What happened next is what truly freaked me out. I decided to head back for a safer route, and this is when I ran out of gas. Even though I was in the middle of nowhere, fortunately, I was relatively close to my park. Now remember when I mentioned the animal tracks? Well, at the time, there were roughly 7 sets of very large tracks around the car, more like 30 feet away or so from my Honda. I assumed the car was maybe being circled, or at least where I was driving, by these grotesque creatures that were watching me. Well, After realizing my car would not start, I walked back to the Great Basin National Park, got reassigned, and eventually transferred to another district altogether. I mentioned this area to emphasize the area I was working at the time. In fact, the Great Basin during this was not well visited, or for anybody else for that matter. And to add to this fact, the roads have been washed out since 2000, meaning the park is now even more desolate. By the way, the car had never really started after this, so I wonder if something more happened. I've heard of paranormal stories where cars and vehicles and electronic devices just malfunction, almost like there's some sort of interference. However, my reliable Honda pooped out on me after this. Could be a coincidence, could be real, I don't know. I do think that these creatures have that capability. Perhaps the fact that it never came after me, well, maybe some entity protected me. Needless to say, skinwalkers are only used as an excuse when law enforcement have little to go off of in some native communities. If you don't know, skinwalkers are a native cryptid, primarily found in the Southwest and sometimes Canada. Those places are full of legends, but it is questionable if there are any flesh and blood things in them. For example, the X-Files episode Skin that aired in the 90s, taking the idea from the Navajo legends. Things like that were subject to a lot of publicity, but if there's ever any proof, then we haven't seen it. But I know for a fact they were trailing me that day, following me, wanting me. Why? I don't know. I'm just glad it never came after me and tried to take my life. Hello. I understand that what I'm about to share might come off as strange. Believe me, I'm the one that experienced it. However, I feel it's important to share this. I know for a fact to this day, I encountered a skinwalker being. I will tell you that I had grown up in Navajo culture. I was raised to know about skinwalkers and other lore about Navajo culture. To sum up my encounter, it was around midnight, closer to Christmas time, and I was in the Navajo reservation. I was closing up for the night, and it was around midnight. I noticed there was something following me around. I could feel it. It had a dark energy to it, and I'm very sensitive to these kinds of spiritual matters. It felt evil. It wasn't a normal evil. It felt like there was a supernatural spirit quality to it. I later called it the dark shadow, since that's how I describe it. At first, I would get feelings like I was being watched and observed. Those types of vibe I would get all of a sudden, and it began to get exciting as I started to get scared. I knew it was a skinwalker at that point, because I was getting this familiar feeling of recognizing it. Then, it started getting very close, like it was in the truck or at least trying to get in. It filled the truck with some strange type of dark energy. Then, as I was about to close after cleaning, at about 2 around closing time, I was saying, "Please, don't let this being get me," and praying and praying. And then I heard a voice. It was a woman's voice. She sounded like she was trying to speak in broken Navajo, telling me that she was going to come get me. She was going to kill me and kill my entire family, banish me to the lower dimensions. I'm not sure if this was the witch, or if this was a skinwalker or what, and I'm not sure why she was speaking in broken Navajo. It doesn't really make sense, and I do know she was speaking into my head. Telepathically, I think they call it. I got even more creeped out, but it seems like the more I prayed, the more and more aggressive she became. Then, that was it. It stopped. I knew for a fact I'd encountered a skinwalker being. Maybe not physically, but I knew it was around. Even though I didn't see it, I'm sure it or her saw me. I know it's around. Thank you for letting me share my encounter with you. I appreciate it. My experience happened in June of 2016, when I was driving in a very remote part of the AT from Maine, a section called the 100-Mile Wilderness. My close friend and I were setting up a remote campsite located off-trail, 30 minutes north of Damascus, and 15 minutes from May Mountain. Night fell rather quickly after dark, with no moon, almost the entire week. I was extremely tired, and my friend decided to stay there with me. but I was pretty adamant about setting up a tent and sleeping there alone, for fear of something happening. I'm a female Iraqi veteran park ranger for a major national park in northern Cali, with extensive training. I'm used to sleeping in rather difficult conditions, alone. I'm also a very seasoned woodsman or woodswoman in health and safety. But this particular night, I was not feeling safe, which is extremely odd for me. There was a feeling in the air, something in the atmosphere. Well, after setting up the tent, I was too exhausted to do anything else but keep my rifle by my side. I crawled into the tent, locked the zipper. A few hours into the night, I heard a bunch of snapping. Then, what sounded like a grumbling growl. I followed shortly by soft footsteps coming in the direction of my camp. Like I said, I had my rifle ready, thinking it might be a bear, but the footsteps sounded wrong. So I raised it, asking whoever was out there to identify themselves. Immediately, the footsteps stopped dead in their tracks. After a bit more grumbling, I asked a few more times, "Who's out there?" over and over. All the while, I heard this deep grumbling, and then more silence. At that moment, I realized I was either dealing with a person or something else. After the deafening silence, I grabbed my high-end LED flashlight, shining it out into the night, and sure enough, I saw an outline of a dark figure skulking right around my tent, and as soon as the light hit it, it ran off. Specifically, it was a wide-cone flashlight. After that, I heard the footsteps pace back several times before the pacing stopped. Now it was quiet, so I lay there in the tent alone all night with my rifle, ready, thinking that something or somebody must have crawled up under it, because I refused to unzip it. Then, I heard swiftly moving water near me, which was an odd sound because I was not near a creek or a river, so I'm not sure what that was about. Eventually, the sun seemed like it came up, and I hurried to get out of there. My friend who had slept nearby asked me what was going on. Apparently, he slept like a baby. I told him nothing. I was so incredibly creeped out by whatever was trying to get in my tent that I didn't want to talk about it. And to this day, that is by far the most eerie experience I've ever had out in the woods. This happened to me a long time ago, right after I became a ranger for the government at one of the top 10 military testing facilities, research and development bases in the United States, the White Sands Missile Range, located in the southern part of New Mexico, right on the border of Chihuahua, Mexico. Right across the land are cliffs and steep mountainsides. I was out on a routine night patrol, making my rounds around the buildings and testing grounds, when I see a small light in the distance moving up the mountainside straight up at a pretty high speed. I was perplexed. I thought at first it was one of the other rangers, but nobody else was around. I got on the radio and tried to contact the other rangers, but could not make contact with anybody. I watched the unknown light get closer to the top of the mountain, swooping down, flying over the radar dome at the top, and then it made a high-speed turn and came straight at me. I was already running back towards one of the buildings I work out of when I looked back to see where the light came from. It was gone. Suddenly, as I looked to my left and right, there stood kind of a humanoid figure. It was kind of soft and wavy, not really defined, but almost jellyfish-like. It spoke to me and told me to come with it. I panicked, and it put one of its glimmering hands out and pointed to me, pointing also at this orange glowing disc-shaped craft coming the other direction. Then, a small bluish one appeared to come out of the ground, almost hovering right over me, then disappearing. I was terrified, going back to the building. I don't know what I experienced or if this was some mass hallucination, but if it wasn't, then I came in contact with a cloaked, intelligent being. I don't know how else to explain it. I've worked in several national parks around New York State, and in the East Coast in general. I've been exposed to strange encounters, usually the standard Sasquatch phenomena, but no history of anything like a Wendigo. I was still new to this park. I was a seasonal ranger, working in maintenance. These big open fields and thick woods on both sides. Sometimes I would be out pruning or cutting back vegetation. The last few times I was out at night, it was late October, and they were having a blast of cold weather in central New York. It seemed to linger at night. During one night, I was around midnight when I was out. It was cold. My car's at the bottom of this long hill in the park. I walked around these huge fields of vegetation to get there. As I was walking along the vacant field, I got a weird feeling, like there was something watching me the closer I got to the bottom. I remember the field seemed endless. I had hiked it in the light of day, but at night it was different. It seemed to just go on forever. I finally see my vehicle and notice something on the other side, about 50 yards away. This thing barely had a shape, standing there, covered almost in a long dark robe that was at least 10 feet tall. It seemed to have extraordinary dark skin or fur. I looked at it closer, and the closer I got, I noticed how its wrinkles and its skin seemed to twist and turn in its expression. There was no face, just these deeper folds and crevices. I stopped, and suddenly felt an extreme sense of fear and concern from this creature. I just packed my stuff and drove home. Did not think anything of it, as best I could. The following day, I'm baling hay out of a trailer on a small farm right near the park. They seem to grow large amounts of their own alfalfa and stuff. They were using this themselves. While I'm baling hay, I get a message from the park supervisor saying that apparently I'm being suspended. There were animal attacks for the park, which I was working for. They had told me to check in with them. Long story short, apparently this farmer had his dog attacked. The dog ended up bleeding while they were meditating, and they found the dog without any hair, missing its tail, and chunks of flesh out of its side, like it was sliced open, losing blood. The farmer did not seem to realize what had happened. This creature, the same one I had seen the night before, we all believed was responsible for it. Anyhow, I know this might sound strange, but I'm still working on the investigation, even though I was suspended for it. Long story short, I was blamed for his dog being attacked. As for the perpetrator who attacked his dog, we're not sure, or on paper, we're not sure, but I know. But apparently I'm responsible, which is why I'm suspended. My experience with the paranormal pretty much begun at age 6 with night terrors. From there, I experienced deep sleep paralysis and a few other strange things. I had a Bigfoot sighting in 2005 while hiking in the Sandia Mountains. I had another experience while camping in the wilderness in Mexico. I was on a 4-wheeler trail and saw a man in camouflage, or what appeared to be camouflage, and as soon as we made eye contact, he crossed his hands in his lap and then kind of slid down to the ground and vanished. I'm not sure how to describe it. The man was in full animal skins and almost appeared to just disintegrate into the air. That's just one of several. I have had other bizarre experiences, but the next experience I have is the one I feel the most weird about, and possibly the most paranormal. I'm older now, but at the time, I was 32. I worked at a state park in western Oklahoma. By trade, I'm a master naturalist, so I lead walks and other public outreach during the day. I was working the night shift as a security officer during this time. I would also volunteer as search and rescue, so if I'm not the closest ranger to an emergency, I'm usually the one who helps answer. But this particular night, I was called for a search about 2 miles from the visitor center. The ranger bringing me in was very calm and claimed it was an elderly man that was lost. He had come from a nursing home in a nearby town and came with family, somehow got turned around and disappeared. I wasn't too concerned, just focused on getting the job done. I've done a lot of searches for missing persons, and we usually find them, alive. Most elderly, in this case, probably just don't take their medication. I found the spot where he was last seen and started my search. I had my radio out so I could stay in touch with the rangers waiting for me. And shortly after is when I began to smell a very strong urine smell. It was overpowering. Because it was very strong, I could not pinpoint the direction. It was downwind from me, but I felt like it was tracking me. I decided to call the rangers and tell them the smell was getting stronger, and it was about a mile from the last spot. It was everywhere in the air. I was told to wait there, and they would send somebody. The smell now was growing in strength. At this point, I had to move away from it. It was overwhelming. Using my light and my pistol, I also had a taser on my belt. I only carry these things when working. I felt like I needed to be properly prepared. I turned around, and I was about 15 yards away from the source of the smell. It looked like a large ape. The thing was huge, large shoulders and a very large jaw. It had gray-whitish fur that was matted with mud and old leaves. It was there kind of next to a tree, with its back against a trunk. I could tell it had very large hands, and on its face, besides the ape features, it appeared to have a very long muzzle. It also had a very strange head, at least the shape though. I would say it was almost similar looking to a bat, while the body was more reminiscent to that of an ape. I saw it for about a second, and it was about 10 feet tall, easily. It was massive. Without hesitating, I turned around and moved out of there as fast as I possibly could, my body completely in shock at what I was seeing. Maybe 5 minutes later, the others arrived. I was shaking and scared and pale. We walked back to the last spot where I saw him, and the rangers found tracks leading back to the spot I'd seen. While the rangers did not see it, I told them what I saw. And surprisingly, they took me very, very seriously. To this day, I have no doubt about what I saw. I had a feeling before the encounter that something wasn't just right. I have a feeling that I knew it was there tracking me and the source of the rank urine smell. I don't know if it was juvenile or something, but it was very intelligent, and it knew how to properly conceal itself. I couldn't see it as it passed. It could have been 5 feet from me, but I never saw it until that moment.